The FAA's new favorite questions on the Part 107 exam, Part 48, IMSAFE, PAVE, ADM, new topics you don't usually find on the Part 107 videos or expect on a Part 107 exam, right? But we're going to discuss them right now. Are you ready to dive in? Let's go. Okay, if you've made it to this video, congratulations. This is the final video in the free Part 107 series 7 of 7. So far, we've covered FAA rules and regulations, airspace, weather, charts, aircraft performance, airport operations. But now we're going to cover something that many students overlook, and they've been overlooking lately, and it seems that the FAA is asking more of these questions on a Part 107 exam. We're talking about Part 48, drone registration, IMSAFE checklist, PAVE checklist, aeronautical decision-making, or ADM. These aren't difficult topics, but if you don't understand them, they could cost you several questions on the exam, and that won't allow you to achieve the 100% passing score. So let's take a few minutes and go over them right now, starting off first with Part 48. And Part 48 covers drone registration. Always remember that. You see, this is one of the areas where students sometimes overthink this area. And the FAA simply wants to know whether you understand whether or not the drone needs to be registered and who is the responsible person for that registration. So here are the basics. If you're flying under Part 107, meaning that you already have a certification, your drone must be registered for flight regardless of the weight. It doesn't matter if the drone weighs under 250 grams or whether the drone weighs over 250 grams or under 55 pounds. It does not matter. If you have a Part 107 certification and you are a remote pilot certified by the FAA, regardless of whatever drone you're flying in, whatever capacity, whatever operation you're running, that drone must be registered with the FAA. So we're going to discuss more about that registration later. I'm going to tell you about the specifics in regard to the individuality of those registrations. But let's continue with this Part 48. Your drone must be registered before flight, regardless of weight. That is what you have to understand if you're flying under Part 107 certification. So here's where you really begin to understand what this all means and how it applies to registration. You see, the registration is assigned to the owner, not the remote pilot. So, meaning that grandma owns the drone, so grandma must register it and not the remote pilot who's operating it. And if it's the remote pilot that's the owner of the drone, then the remote pilot is the one who the registration is applied to. It's the owner of the drone where this registration is applied to. So the registration number, let's discuss this. Once you receive that number, where should it be displayed? Well, everyone says on the exterior of the aircraft, and some of the old-timers like Grandma will say, well, you can put it inside of the battery compartment, honey, and just close the battery so nobody can see it. It's not a problem. Well, Grandma, that's the old school ways. You see, the FAA Part 107 question is going to ask you something like this. Where may the FAA registration unique identifier be displayed on a small unmanned aircraft? Answers. A, inside of the battery compartment, if it can be assessed without the use of tools, or B, on any external surface of the aircraft where it can be legibly or securely affixed, or C, inside of the aircraft as long as it is visible during pre-flight inspection. Well, Grandma, what do you think the correct answer will be? Well, honey, I think the correct answer is you can put it inside of the battery compartment like I told you. Grandma, under 14 CFR 48.205C, the FAA requires that the registration number be legibly displayed on the exterior surface of the aircraft. Grandma, that is old school. Back in 2015, where the original rule was that the FAA would allow you to put the number inside of the battery compartment as long as they can access that, or as long as they can see that serial number once removing the battery without tools. That's the way it was in 2015. But February 25th, 2019, the FAA changed that rule. The registration number must be affixed on the exterior surface of the aircraft. Placing it inside of the battery compartment, Grandma, is no longer permitted. So this is what you need to understand, and this is where the confusion and the overthinking comes in whenever it is you're thinking old school, but these are new school rules with the FAA Part 107 exam. So staying with Part 48, let's move to carrying proof of registration, which is also on the Part 107 exam. You must carry registration whenever you're operating a drone, plain and simple, unless you are flying for fun and the drone weighs under 250 grams. So remember this. Let me repeat that, by the way. If you're flying for fun and your drone is under 250 grams, you do not need to register the drone. But if you are flying a drone that requires registration, such as if you are a commercial flyer or you're Part 107 or you're carrying a certificate from the FAA, any drone, regardless of whatever it weighs, must be registered. So remember this, drone registration and remote ID are two completely separate requirements. Don't confuse the two, because the FAA likes asking these type of questions because they know that both of these are confusing. Registration versus remote ID. One is for drone registration, one is for remote ID. They're two completely separate things. So the one mistake that many Part 107 applicants make is that they're thinking that the registration and the remote ID are one and the same, and they're not. Think of it this way. Registration identifies the aircraft owner. Remote ID identifies the aircraft. You see how that's different? They work together, but they both serve a different purpose. So let's recap the registration part of this. As an FAA Part 107 remote pilot, you must register the drone. Now, I'm saying FAA Part 107 pilot, not recreational flyers, because you're taking the Part 107 exam. So let's recap. As an FAA Part 107 remote pilot, you must register the drone before flying. The registration is valid for 3 years. You must carry proof of registration when operating that drone. The registration identifies you or the owner of that aircraft, or whoever the owner of the aircraft is. Think of this as a license plate for a car. You always will need to have the registration paperwork in the glove compartment. Am I right? It's the same exact thing with the drone. Keep the registration on you at all times when you're operating that drone. So let's move to now remote ID, which is the other half of this confusing thing. Remote ID is covered under 14 CFR Part 89, not 14 CFR Part 48. Isn't that interesting? Remote ID does not replace registration. Instead, it's an electronic broadcast of information of the aircraft during flight. So to remain in compliance, remote ID systems will broadcast information such as the drone's unique identification number, the drone's location, the drone's altitude, the drone's velocity, the timestamp at the moment in time that you're taking the actual broadcast or you're receiving the actual broadcast, the control station where the remote controller with the remote pilot is located, any emergency status when applicable. And the reason that I'm bringing both of these to your attention, remote ID and registration, is because this is where students get the most confused. Many of our DJI drones have remote ID or a remote ID serial number. This is not the FAA registration number. For example, your FAA registration number may look something like, it'll say FA3X7YZ9. Okay, let's move to the next topic, IMSAFE. Now, that's a pretty creative acronym, right? IMSAFE. This is probably one of the easiest acronyms you'll ever have to memorize. Unfortunately, there aren't too many videos or study guides on this topic because it's relatively new with the FAA, and a lot of the older content is getting older faster, more quickly. So what exactly is IMSAFE? Well, here it is. IMSAFE is a personal fitness checklist. It's used by airplane pilots and now being introduced to the Part 107 remote pilots. The reason the FAA implemented this is because they want you, the pilot, to be able to determine if there are any physical and mental concerns regarding you, the pilot, being able to fly or operate an aircraft. This includes drones, because a drone is a small unmanned aircraft. So the FAA doesn't expect you to simply memorize the acronym for the Part 107 exam. No, they want you to know IMSAFE and how it affects aeronautical decision making. In other words, can you recognize when you have become a risk factor? Let's break this down right now so you understand IMSAFE. Before you fly, the FAA expects you to evaluate yourself. Before you even touch an aircraft, you have to evaluate yourself. This is why the IMSAFE exists as a checklist. So let's go over each letter in the acronym so that way you have a complete understanding, not just to memorize what the letters mean, but have a complete understanding for what actually the FAA wants you to know about. Now, the I in IMSAFE stands for illness. Ask yourself this question: are you sick? Even if you have a simple cold, a flu, a fever, do you have the ability to concentrate, to focus, to make good decisions? Are you able to fly the aircraft because you feel healthy? That's what the I in the IMSAFE stands for, illness. The M stands for medication. Ask yourself this question: are you currently taking medication? Are you currently on prescription? Do you have over-the-counter medication that you've been taking recently? Any medications that may cause you to be drowsy or have slower reaction time or make you feel dizzy? Are you taking medications that's going to make you have poor judgment? These are the questions that you need to be asking before you actually fly an aircraft or fly a drone. The S stands for stress. Now, this isn't always obvious because, quite frankly, you know that there are a lot of people who are extremely stressed out and they have absolutely no clue that they're stressed. But you can be stressed, and stress is a factor when it comes to flying a drone safely. Now, stress isn't always obvious, as I mentioned, but it could come in the form of you, for example, whenever it is that you're working too much, or you have family issues, you have financial issues that are going on, or let's say you have to meet certain deadlines. It may not always be obvious, but what is known is that stress reduces your ability to make sound decisions whenever it is you're flying an aircraft. Now, the letter A stands for alcohol, and alcohol, as you know, can affect your judgment long after you've had that drink at Teddy's bar. The FAA's minimum standard is that no flying within 8 hours of consuming alcohol and no blood alcohol concentration of 0.04 or greater. Remember this for a moment, okay? If you had something that was controlling you, then basically what that means is that you're out of control, and therefore so will your drone be out of control. So let's move to the next letter, F, which stands for fatigue. Now, fatigue is one of the biggest hidden risks. Now, you may think you're fine. You may think you have a lot of energy. But the fact of the matter is that if you feel tired, if you feel fatigued, then this can reduce your attention, it can reduce your memory, it can reduce your reaction time, and the FAA treats fatigue very seriously. It's a really serious concern, because if you feel tired and you don't feel as though you have enough energy, you're fatigued to be able to fly a drone, then basically what you're doing is putting yourself at risk. And the last letter is E, and that stands for emotion. Now, in the FAA Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge, it emphasizes emotional fitness as part of the IMSAFE checklist. Strong emotions such as anger, frustration, anxiety, excitement, all of these can interfere with sound judgment when flying a drone. So how does IMSAFE relate to the Part 107 exam? Well, the FAA will not ask you a question such as, what does the letter S stand for? Instead, they're going to ask you scenario-based questions. For example, this is a typical FAA-style question. Before conducting a Part 107 operation, a remote pilot has been taking cold medication that causes drowsiness. What should the pilot do? A, fly only if weather conditions are favorable. B, conduct the operation because the medication is available over the counter. Or C, delay the flight until the medication no longer affects the pilot's ability to operate safely. Now, come on. You can see that the first two, A and B, are absolutely and utterly ridiculous. The only correct answer is going to be C, and it makes sense. So this is what the FAA is looking for, that you answer the questions appropriately. Okay, next is PAVE, another acronym, P-A-V-E. This is another risk management tool. PAVE actually helps you to evaluate the flight before takeoff. I have already discussed this in my previous videos, but let's recap here. The letter P stands for pilot. Are you qualified? Are you current? Are you healthy? Are you properly rested? A stands for aircraft. Is the drone airworthy? Are the batteries charged? Have you done a firmware update? Is there any damage on the drone? The letter V stands for environment. How's the weather? Do you have adequate visibility? Is the airspace adequate? Are you flying in proper airspace? Are there any obstacles or anything outside that could affect your flight or your operation? The letter E stands for external pressures. Now, this is the biggest cause for poor judgment, poor decisions, because for example, if you have a client who's anxiously waiting, impatient, and you're driving 2 hours to get there, well, these are external pressures. These type of pressures can cause you to make poor judgment decisions, and the FAA wants you to recognize these pressures and how they can influence your decision making. So make sure you're taking notes and going over all of these acronyms. I will be putting this on my website at mikesites.com. You will see them under flashcards. Okay, so lastly, let's move to ADM, and this is where everything comes together. ADM stands for Aeronautical Decision Making. It's a process of making safe decisions before and during every flight. Did you notice how I said before and during every flight? The FAA is not looking for perfection here. What they're looking for is good judgment. Can you recognize hazards? Can you evaluate risk? Can you make safe decisions when the conditions actually are changing? This is what ADM is all about. You see, ADM is kind of like an umbrella that's over everything. You have IMSAFE, that's a checklist that checks you, the remote pilot. You have PAVE, the checklist that checks the mission or the evaluation of the operation. And then the totality of all of this, you have aeronautical decision making, or ADM. So here is a Part 107 question relating to ADM that you'll probably see on the Part 107 exam. The forecast shows increasing winds, and you're tired because you've just worked a 12-hour shift. Your customer is insisting that the flight has to happen today. What should you do? The correct answer is to reevaluate the operation. There are multiple risk factors here: fatigue, weather conditions, external pressures from the client. This is exactly the situation that the FAA expects you to recognize. And passing the Part 107 exam isn't about proving that you are fearless. It's about proving that you can make safe decisions. So here's my usual tip. As you prepare for the Part 107 exam, don't memorize the acronym's letters. Understand what they mean and why they exist. Whenever you see a question involving judgment, think safety first. Put safety ahead of everything else. And if you see two answers that seem to be correct, choose the safest bet. The FAA will always prefer the safest option or the safer option. So that about wraps up my Part 107 series. This was 7 of 7. I am going to be doing some drone tutorials next, a series of videos to show you how to actually fly drones, stick inputs, and a whole bunch of other interesting things. You want to stay tuned for that. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can follow this channel. I hope these Part 107 videos made your studying much easier and gave you a little more confidence in heading into the exam. Share this video as much as you can with other people who are trying to study for the Part 107 exam and earn their Part 107 certificate. I want to wish you all the very best on the exam. Congratulations to those of you who scored a 100% on the exam. You've proven that it is possible to get a 100% passing score. And I will see you all on the next video.